Thank you very much. I'm sorry I couldn't be here tonight, but I hope you like my hologram. We've been working on it, so it's pretty realistic. So there's no point throwing tomatoes or anything like that, because it'll just go right through me. I'm going to first give a broad presentation of the new technologies and emerging technologies that I've been exposed to over the last while. But what I'm going to be presenting to you is just a snapshot of what people are doing in the real world. And the people who are actually doing these kinds of things are some of the panelists that will be speaking to you tonight. So I feel very privileged to be with people who are doing the real thing on the ground. And to start with, holograms aren't very good at things. So the first picture is a look at how many artificial intelligence startups are getting venture capital funding in Silicon Valley as of April last year. That's exactly a year ago. And in case you can't count them all, actually it's just a sample of what's out there. There's 1,730 companies getting $13.5 billion worth of funding. So the gentlemen sitting in the front row are probably not going to be staying the rest of the evening. But what's significant about this is the wide range of categories of artificial intelligence that are attracting funding. But this slide is just a precursor to what came next. Between April last year and December last year, there was, if this is a revolution, there was a real revolution. Look what happened in just 8 months to this picture. 2,029 artificial intelligence startups getting $27 billion in venture capital funding. So the amount of venture capital being thrown at AI doubled in just 8 months. That's why these guys aren't going to be sticking around, because there is just so much opportunity. But the opportunity is because there is so much innovation, there is so much thinking, and there are so many directions in which artificial intelligence can go. But what I want you to bear in mind is, if this is the level of funding and these are the numbers of startups that are getting funding, you can just imagine in the next few years how much of this technology is going to break out into the mainstream. And when you drill down into specific areas of AI and specific geographies, you also start seeing the intensity of what's happening, of innovation, of thinking, and of new products that are emerging onto the market. So just for example, out of that $27 billion in funding, $3.5 billion is going to startups from Israel alone, what they refer to as the Silicon Wadi as opposed to the Silicon Valley, and hundreds of startups just in that area. So where there is a focus on the technology, where there is a focus on the opportunity, you also see a massive fermentation of ideas and of innovation. And that's certainly an opportunity that exists for this country as well. So I'm going to take you through what I've been exposed to directly in terms of emerging technologies in the last few months that give a clear picture of what's coming next. So at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January, for example, the big standout trend was voice built into everything. This was a kitchen appliance manufacturer that usually at CES displays the latest kitchen appliances that are connected, that are part of the Internet of Things. But this year, it was all voice-activated appliances. So, for example, you could tell your coffee machine to make a cappuccino. And that sounds trivial, but think about this. Every single machine operates differently. Every time you have to make your own coffee, and you have to use a coffee machine to do it, you've got to read the manual to figure out how to do it. The coffee machine of the very near future, in fact, of the present, if you're buying Gourmet's coffee machines, you just tell it, and the coffee machine decides what sequence of buttons have to be pressed, what sequence of commands have to be executed in order to make whatever your choice of coffee is. And that's the promise of voice control, is that you no longer have to work out how to control a product. You can tell the product to control itself. So we're seeing it in a big way, for example, in smart TVs. That was one of the other big trends. The TV manufacturers were as big on their new displays as they were on Alexa being built into those displays. The autonomous car of the future is going to be very complex, but it will have voice control built into it. So you'll tell the car what to do. You no longer have to work out how things work. You just have to work out how to tell it what to do. The problem there, of course, is if you don't know which are the right commands to give it. We have an Amazon Alexa device in our office, the Amazon Echo. And part of the reason is to experiment and see what works and what doesn't. And we constantly throw questions at it or instructions. And one of its most common responses is, I don't know how to do that, or I don't have an answer. So it tells you that even with voice control, the artificial intelligence built into these devices still has a long way to go. But it's come a long way, and it's about to accelerate very rapidly. This one will appeal to the gentleman who will be on the panel. This is, to me, the most advanced technology that I saw being demonstrated, not quite in action, but certainly in theory by Nissan. B2V stands for brain to vehicle. It certainly beats B2C, business to consumer, anytime. And the idea of this is that the device strapped to your head picks up your brain waves and signals to the artificial intelligence built into the car what your intentions are, what you're going to do next, because you've spotted an obstacle in the road. The problem is, when you spot an obstacle or a hazard in the road, it takes you a second or two to process that and also to then execute a command to your body. Whereas if your brain waves are being picked up by the AI in the car, which is operating 1,000 or 1,000,000 times faster than your body's ability to process that instruction, the car can, at the very least, prepare itself for what you're going to do. So when you slam on brakes, instead of the car going into a tailspin, it's already delivered power to the wheels, to the ABS system, etc. So it enhances safety at this stage. At a later stage, it will be able to pick up your intentions in advance in safer environments and help you to drive the car better. And I'll come back to that one in a moment. This was probably the most subtly significant of all displays. That was the Intel stand at the Consumer Electronics Show. And all those blue squares receding into the background are all part of one stand. So it wasn't exactly a stand, it was more like a city. And in the city you had different villages, and in the front you see the 5G village. And what they were demonstrating there was a single mobile connection using 5G instead of 4G, with the capability of transmitting a double high definition video, 4K video, as well as a virtual reality movie, which uses massive amounts of data, simultaneously on the same mobile connection with bandwidth to spare. 1.6 gigabits per second was the speed of that connection. Can you imagine what it makes possible, and how it speeds up the processing of data between devices and from device to human and human to device, which we'll be hearing a little more about shortly. Then, a few weeks later, at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, where all the new mobile technologies get launched, this is one of the most common sights, people playing with virtual reality headsets. But there's a fatal flaw in this picture. I don't know if anyone can pick up what's wrong with this picture in one instant.
Cables.
Cables, exactly. Wires. The problem with virtual reality right now is that it demands so much throughput that can't be delivered wirelessly, that it has to be tethered to a machine if you want a true high-resolution experience. The associated problem is that most virtual reality is not yet photorealistic. So if you come into VR as a skeptic, you're going to see all those pixels all the time. I do. And it frustrates me because I want it to feel like a real experience, but it's still very much a virtual experience. But the combination of 5G and the other technologies we're talking about, the artificial intelligence, will finally bring VR into its own. But it's still going to take another couple of years. You'll hear a bit more about this, I think, as well. This is smart clothing. This is clothing with sensors built in, with charging built into it, power in your actual clothing, so you never have to worry about your devices powering down, unless you get lost in the desert. But in that case, for a while at least, it will also keep you cool. Or if you're lost in the Arctic, I don't know if anyone does that, but it'll keep you warm as well. Anyone watch Lost in Space on Netflix lately? Quite a bit of the capabilities that you see there is already being introduced into the smart clothes that were on display at Mobile World Congress. And then my personal favorite is Pepper the robot. If you attended the talks I gave to the alumni club over the last 2 years, you'll have met Pepper. In my encounters with him at a financial conference where they were demonstrating his ability as a payment mechanism, taking orders in restaurants and the like. And my favorite story about Pepper was when I first met him, and I said, "Hello, Pepper," and he said, "Hello, human." And I was totally captivated, and I realized that people's concern about robots serving them in fast food restaurants would evaporate very fast, because Pepper was far more engaging than most waiters I've ever done. And in this case, Pepper was acting as a public relations front end for an organization, taking questions and answering those questions based on a knowledge base built into the robot. And you may have heard Nedbank have brought 1 unit of Pepper into the country to demonstrate its ability to be a customer interface. It sounds far-fetched, it sounds like a gimmick, but in Japan, insurance companies are already, as a matter of routine, putting Pepper into the front offices as a first point of welcome for visitors, for potential customers. So Pepper will take questions from people that they wouldn't normally want to ask a human being because they're embarrassed, or it will take information from them when they fill in forms, in this case verbally, that they normally wouldn't want to tell a human being. But Pepper sort of lowers the barrier of resistance to sharing personal information, as opposed to the preconception of robots being more impersonal. In fact, for some people, they're a lot more personal. And then also in February at Cisco Live in Barcelona, one of the most interesting talks there was on what we can expect over the next 30 years. And I'm just going to look at the next decade or so at 4 of the most interesting predictions. Flying cars by 2022. Why? Because Dubai has already commissioned hover taxis to go into operation by then. 2025, smartphones disappear because everything will be gesture-based and voice-based. Therefore, you don't actually need a screen as such or a device as such. All you need is a small earpiece, perhaps something on your glasses if you wear glasses, perhaps something on your lapel, and it'll pick up gestures, it'll pick up voice commands and the like. So theoretically, the need for a handset disappears. There are many arguments against that, I know. 2027, text by thinking, and that puts into context the Nissan brain-to vehicle idea, that you can actually, through your brain waves, compose text. And I think these gentlemen are going to talk a bit more about that, I hope so, shortly as well. I just want to warn you, drunk texting will take on new meaning. And then by 2038, they expect to be able to simulate the human brain, which is regarded as a massive scientific breakthrough, which I hope you guys will also talk about a little bit more. And then fast forwarding to today, just today in my inbox, 2 fascinating pieces that arrived. And what is highlighted that every single day there are massive breakthroughs, innovations, new products being launched. So what I saw at those shows weren't just what people were showcasing for the future. It's an example of what is constantly coming at us in terms of new technology. So these are 2 items that arrived in my inbox. One was an article by the GM of Lenovo South Africa, Thibaut Dosen. Over the next year, when customers speak a command, we'll increasingly see a tailored response applicable to that command. What he's talking about is voice becoming the new interface. And he was saying that point and click is an old paradigm that will disappear in the coming years. But this year is when you really start seeing that intensifies. So that reinforces the message that I saw at Consumer Electronics Show. And then the other fascinating one was from Lee Knight, the CEO of TransUnion, who said that for years we've been talking about passwords disappearing because they're so inefficient. In fact, the point he makes is that passwords go back to the years of, or the days of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. So a technology, you could say, or a technology solution that goes back thousands of years into myth and legend, we're still using today, tells you why there are so many breaches, because we still depend on such an archaic technology. And the reality is that biometric security, keys, fingerprint scanners, and voice will become the password in the very near future. This is all now. This is what these guys are seeing happening this year. It's not in the distant future. And then finally, I'm going to show you 4 very quick slides of how emerging technologies are being viewed in South Africa. This is from research we conducted amongst corporations in South Africa. That's companies with 200 employees upward. It included companies with more than 10,000 staff as well. And we asked about 5 or 6 different technologies, and these are the key ones. So the top pie shows the proportion of companies using those technologies. Internet of Things, 66%, 2/3. The next one on the right shows the proportion of companies not using it who plan to use it in the future. 84% of those not using it are planning to use, in effect, connected devices as a tool in the business. And then for those who aren't using it, is cost the reason? 100%, the bottom pie, 100% said no, cost is not the reason. So the other issues are either strategic or it's not applicable. And then on the left-hand side, if you currently use it, you're going to increase usage, and every single respondent said that they were going to increase usage, which means that the use case, the business case, and the motivation and justification for it is all in place already. But then we move on to big data and machine learning. This is to encapsulate artificial intelligence. And here was the flip side of that coin. Only 13% were already using AI. But of those not using it, 63% were planning to use it. But if they weren't planning to use it, is cost the reason? 100% said no. So they don't see AI as too expensive, whereas a few years ago it would have been seen as hideously expensive. And that is partly driven by the thousands of companies that are coming out with AI solutions, and AI now being built into your technology that you're buying, as opposed to an add-on to your technology. So this phone here is a Huawei P20 Pro. The camera is driven by artificial intelligence. So it recognizes the kind of scene that you're about to photograph, and it adjusts the settings for that kind of scene automatically. You could say that's just automation or clever software, but it's a form of AI built into the phone, as opposed to you having to buy it and install it and pay a license fee for it. That was the model of years gone by. The coming model is that AI will be built into all or most new technology. That's why cost is not a factor. If you currently use it, you're going to increase your usage. 3/4 of companies say yes. So small, but about to explode in South Africa as well. Blockchain, an entirely different picture. Only 3% using blockchain at the moment. That's the distributed ledger technology that's behind Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Of those who don't use it, only 40% plan to use it. That is still quite high for such a new emerging technology. But here's the interesting thing. If they're not planning to use it, is cost the reason? And 46%, almost half, say cost is the reason. So where AI is not seen as a cost factor, blockchain is seen as a massive cost factor, primarily because the skills aren't there for it. So you're going to have to pay truly top dollar or top Bitcoin to bring those skills in. However, if you currently use it, you're going to increase your usage. All of those 3%, it's small, but every one of them said yes, they're going to increase the usage. So once people start using it, they can see the value proposition very fast. Incidentally, Walmart is now requiring that their suppliers from China all have blockchain technology built into the supply chain to ensure food security. Just to give you an idea of the kind of use case that makes it viable. And then finally robotics, which is the coolest one, but the most expensive one. So only 6% of respondents were using some form of robotics. Of the rest, 47% were planning to use it. But those who weren't planning to use it, 97% said cost was the reason. So with robotics, cost is a major drawback. It's a major reason why there's only one pepper in South Africa right now, and why you're not going to see a rapid arrival of robots in the workforce. Outside of automation, I'm not talking about car manufacture and the like, but the kind of robot that you see as a customer interface is not going to rush into the South African workplace. And if do you plan to increase usage if you currently use it? 64% said that they plan to increase usage. So only 2/3. Only in inverted commas, of course, but it's of a very small proportion of companies. So you can see every technology has a different value proposition. Every technology has a different flight path, you could say. But what you can see is the future arriving in South Africa just as it is everywhere else in the world. Thank you. I'm going to kick straight off with asking Benjamin to give us a sense of the work he does in transferring skills to robots. What are the implications of that for skills transfer to humans? And does it mean we no longer have to transfer skills to humans?
All right, so as I was saying, there's three aspects that of knowledge transfer one can look at. One can look at transferring knowledge from humans to robots, which is typically what we call skill acquisition, although it doesn't have to come from humans. We can look at the transfer of knowledge between robots, and we can look at knowledge transfer from robots back to humans. That last one is one we do a lot less of, but I'll talk about that as well. The bulk of the work that I actually focus on is transfer between robots, or even the same robot. So the idea is that if I've learned certain things about the world, by virtue of that, the next thing I learn should be easier to learn. So for example, if I've got a magical robot I've brought home that I've taught to sweep the floors, if I want to teach it to mop the floors, it should be faster to learn to do that by virtue of already having learned something about holding a stick and making contact with the ground with this tool and not bumping into walls and all sorts of things like that. So that's a big aspect of the research that we do in my lab. By the same token, we do also look at this notion of acquiring skills into robots. So there are the two ways that happens. One is through demonstration by humans. So you can have a human demonstrating a skill of some sort, and then the robot needs to try to figure out what the human's doing and to be able to replicate that as well. And in that space, we've even looked at can you try and take what the human's demonstrating, segment this into lots of little skills and break that up and learn all those things separately. So if the human's gone and made a cake, can you then deduce that there's a thing called breaking eggs or pouring milk or mixing ingredients together and that sort of thing. We also do a lot of work in getting robots to learn from their own experience, and that's a piece of the work as well. But to get back to the non-context part of the question, there's some interesting work on how to transfer knowledge back from robots, and one thought about how to use this is to use robots as kind of repositories of kind of human skills in various kinds of art forms where, you know, there might be very few people who know how to do something, whether it's thatching particular kinds of roofs or certain kinds of sculpture and so on, and you can use this as a way to actually transfer knowledge back to another generation of workers or people just interested in the craft.
Like YouTube with legs?
Yeah, why not?
Thanks. One of the reasons I was excited to be chairing this panel was because of the work I saw Adam was doing in what he calls brain to net. Because when I was talking about text to speech and brain to vehicle, initially people were resisting and rejecting that and basically calling BS. But here's the guy who has the answer to that. So I'd really like to hear more in general about what brain to net is, but also is all the promise of brain signals being used as a tool in the physical world real, or is it BS?
Thanks very much, Arthur. Okay, great. So we in the School of Electrical and Information Engineering here at Wits have been working on a number of projects around what we call brain-computer interfaces. So this is the field where you connect a person up to a computer through their brain, or human-computer interfaces. Obviously, a keyboard, for instance, is a human-computer interface device. The project that you refer to, Arthur, is actually a project where we took an EEG, so a measurement that happens on the surface of your scalp. You may know it from the medical context. And we streamed EEG data onto a server on the internet in real time. We believe it to be a world-first live stream of a person's really thoughts or activity in their brain onto the internet. Now, why would we do such a thing? It might be horrifying to you, but the idea here is that what we're trying to do is show a proof of concept of a future application where we have Internet of Things nodes as people, really. Effectively, people connected to a network in such a way that they form part of the network. And even though this is quite a cumbersome prototype, consisting of a big electronic headset, a battery pack that you carry around, and something to stream data onto the internet, and then of course a server doing the processing on the server side, it proves a principle that in the future a connected human might be someone who is effectively walking around, immediately interacting or transacting with this network, with potentially implants that interface with our very neurology. So this means it could be inside our bodies. So to answer your fundamental question about is this BS, I certainly don't believe so. It doesn't look very good to wear an EEG headset while you're driving, and especially with, Benji makes the point of the onset of autonomous cars, surely we have a better way of navigating this problem rather than going with a human in the loop. But it's a very interesting proposition, and I certainly don't think it is BS at all. In fact, I put forward the idea that sooner than we think, we're going to be dealing with questions around how we manage these types of technologies, where we are actually interfacing with computers in a very intimate way. And Vukosi raises an excellent point about privacy, which is currently very topical with Facebook. Before I digress too much, I'm going to hand back to you. Hope that answers the question.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to ask Vimbai to talk about the areas in which she's been doing research, which is around human behavior in financial activity, but also in terms of the future of digital money in relation to human behavior. And part of the context for my question there is that everyone hears about cash being dead, cash being removed from the system, and it's all becoming digital, and therefore cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is the future, because people don't want to have cash. But the human impulse is still to have cash in their hands. So I'm curious about what the research shows and what your perspective is of the future of money and of human behavior around money.
Thank you, Arthur. Quite a lot of questions in one, but I'll try and answer all of them. So I think looking at my research, firstly, around human behavior, a lot of what I've learned is money, and where money is concerned, people are very fragile, people are very private, and so trust plays a huge issue when it comes especially to innovation and to technology. People want to know that my money is safe, people want to be able to trust the company, people want to know that, for example, Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, people don't understand it yet, which is probably why the statistics that Arthur presented, companies are not using it as much yet, because they just do not understand it. Regulations are not playing with the financial companies as well. Why? Because we're still trying to understand. And especially when I look at the space that I work in, so I look after African countries, you find that a lot of them haven't even started using mobile banking. A lot of them haven't even started using the internet. In South Africa, for example, if we look, only 26% have access to the internet. So if you look at statistics like that, you then begin to understand why people, when it comes to money, some would actually rather hide it under their mattresses, because what is this Bitcoin? What is this cryptocurrency we're talking about? Am I going to be safe if the bank says they investing my money in all of these things. Maybe I should keep it at home. You and me, we've been to university, we a bit more educated, might start understanding it. But for the larger majority, it's still really a trust issue, and that's what it boils down to. But for you then look at the middle class, and if we also look at the statistics, the middle class, especially in South Africa, is really growing. And for them, because they've started understanding and trusting, what they are then looking for is financial services that can offer them speed, that can offer them efficiencies. So you're now looking at companies and people as well transacting regionally, globally, and I want to be able to know that if I transact today, if I'm sending money to Arthur, he's going to get the money tomorrow instead of a week, which it used to take, telegraphic transfers and whatnot used to take a week. Today, I can pay you RTGS, you receive the money same day. So for those who understand the technology behind money, they're now looking for efficiencies and optimization in that process. I think I also look at your other questions. So there was around the research that I'm doing. I think you also wanted me to speak towards.
Yes. Give us an idea of what you're seeing in your research.
Okay. So within my research, especially in the African space, is we still have a way to go. If I look at South Africa, we've already started the work towards using AI within financial services. So especially within the operations environment, the kind of work that we had 20 people doing, for example, now we use AI, we're starting to implement robotics, and you'll find that AI can do, one computer can actually do the work of 20 people. And that is a bit scary because people would then ask about redundancy. It is a bit scary. But for the larger population, it also makes, financial services more opportunistic. It also makes it more efficient. The other thing that we're finding in Africa now is because of regulations, governments as such are a bit wary towards collaborating or allowing banks to take on full capacity technology. And that is mainly because of issues like money laundering. Governance is not completely fully ingrained within the societies. So I won't mention companies right now going through governance issues. I'm sure we've all read about them. But it really does affect you and me, So at the end of the day, because your money is involved in it, you really want to know and understand, what does technology do for me? So as banks and with the... Sorry, I don't know. Maybe I'm talking too much. Yeah. Hello. Okay, it's better. Is it worse? Hello. Okay, it doesn't want me to talk anymore.
That's better.
Okay, I'll give my last point then. Okay. So within financial services, what you're really trying to do now in the research that I'm looking at is data mining, or using data for prescriptive and perspective within client-centric solutions, working with our clients to understand exactly what it is that they want and what we can offer them, right from the unbanked up into the millionaires, the billionaires. What solutions can we offer within technology that will make you feel safe, that will make you feel, you can use technology, and what exactly those innovations involve. I'm sure you've all now heard of these engineers in the banks, and really those engineers are just mining the data, looking at what our population wants, looking at what is client-centric and what we can rightly offer our clients.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this is working again. Sunil has been president of the IT Association for 3 two-year terms this decade. He's also director of government relations at CSR and CSR at SAP Africa. I'm repeating his credentials because I want to ask him, within the context of those roles, how is he seeing the take-up of these emerging technologies in industry in general and in government specifically, and also what your perspective is of what the other panelists are telling us in that context.
Yes, thanks very much. How are you guys doing out there? I see a good spread of people, from some really young people to some a little bit not so young people. This means this topic is really relevant, and it's awesome to be here. Thank you. We have a very esteemed panel. Just listening to some of the comments, you can see this sort of continuum from the guys who are in the research and development to the applications to the money makers. And that's what artificial intelligence is all about. Now, coming to the question, obviously, in the IT industry in South Africa, at ITL, we have 188 companies that are members, from multinationals to mid-range companies, to the smaller enterprises. And artificial intelligence is appearing more and more often. In fact, if you Google any Dow Jones listed company or a FTSE company right now in the IT industry with AI, you'll find that there'll be a match. So it's a critical platform that everyone is looking at from various sense of the word. And customers obviously are making demands. And today, you know this better than anyone else, the customers out there know more about the product space than the actual OEMs in most cases. So to be very specific, AI has huge potential. There's huge revenue potential. It's a great space to be in. You would have seen when, I don't know how good you guys' memories are, but Arthur put up 2 slides that were very important about the venture capital space, and I just came out of the States. I was in LA and then in New York. And there was a company up there. It was the second logo from the left. It was called Spice. Anyone remembers that?
Yeah.
No? Okay. And you remember it because it's dinner time. And just to look at this from a research perspective, and to my colleagues to the right, MIT is one of those universities or institutions that's right up there. We have 4 university students who work together, and they came up with a restaurant that basically focuses on delivering you meals with the total utilization of robots. And what's great about that aspect is that the one thing in life you want from your life partner, your kids, your work environment is not love, consistency. Right? That's what you want.
Blind obedience.
Blind obedience too.
Dinner.
And dinner, right? And dinner, of course. And dinner, of course. And that's what these 4 graduates of MIT have done. And you can see the investment is there. So I think there's potential for anyone of any age to get a piece of this action. Moving more particular, I just want to drop down a couple of levels before I come to the government question, and I hope I'm not going too much over time. You pinch me when that happens. So while I was in the States, I also took a group of students who were from various countries in East Africa. They went to a university to participate in an entrepreneurship competition. And the university was Delaware, and you can check it out. So these kids were in town, I heard about it, and I invited them over to come on down to our SAP offices. And for those of you who've seen pictures of, most of you know where New York is, you've heard the stories. We have a beautiful building overlooking the East River. And these kids came over, and one of the things we have at SAP, which I think is so amazing, and I'd love for all of you to come to the launch of this event. It's not a commercial, but it's happening sometime soon, is we have a Leonardo Center. And that Leonardo Center is basically a center where you can be a kid again. It's Disney on steroids. Okay? We're getting customers there, we get organizations of all forms, cultures, creeds, religion. They come in and they work on solutions that impact them in life. And I looked around and I saw there were some very well-heeled people. Wits graduates, they earn really well, I believe so. And there's a good spread of women in the audience. One of the things that we spoke about, and is a big matter for us as individuals, is the way that we consume. And companies, particularly in the IT industry, are looking at those levers that enable the next generation of revenue. And you all are going to buy winter clothing. So the one application we showed these kids was we took one of the young ladies and we got her to walk, and we showed her how she'd be walking in 42nd Street going up to United Nations. And this camera would pick her up, and the artificial intelligence, which some of my colleagues work on in the back end and develop, would then clothe her with the latest fashion apparel, with the price tag indicating the discounted rate at a one-time price offer for the next 4 months. Right? And you know how that appeals to people, right? We give one something. So, that, just touching on that. Then, just to talk about the government space, the government space is very interesting. Ramaphosa, I think, he's got a good set of advisors that's talking to him. He's setting up this industrial commission or digital industrial commission that will look at the whole issue of spectrum, which is the way that we use the spectrum radio frequency, and will look at the utilization of the digital economy, for the betterment of the country. And we're seeing already some facets of that. In the Commonwealth meeting that took place now in the UK, he mentioned that quite aggressively. And there'll be a conference coming up. But just on the side of that, what he's doing as well with the World Economic Forum is setting up some real-life engagements with global CEOs, the date to be confirmed in June, where this is featuring as one of the topics. Technology, of course, the substance, AI, big data, the things that are spoken about. And citizen-centric government. I mean, the whole matter of the way funds are utilized in government, we have no visibility. I mean, most of you here, I do believe, are in the top paying brackets of tax in the country. I see those looks on your face. And you want artificial intelligence to help you in some way to be more accountable in terms of budgets used. And maybe something that I just want to throw out there from a government perspective. I don't know if you heard the announcement yesterday, but the Minister of Science and Technology has agreed to invest, just listen to this number, because you can't count it in a lifetime. I tried a few times, I missed it. 2 billion rands, if you count it 1, 2, 3, up to 2 billion, that is, into the SKA project. And a lot of that works on big data, artificial intelligence. So there's a huge opportunity out there. Government is creating the platform, they're putting the budget down, they're talking about a mid-range to a top range. And then, of course, with the collaboration with Australia, there's approximately 6.4 billion euros that's been set aside for that project alone. So, what does this all mean? You've come out tonight, you sacrificed time with your families to listen to this talk, to my esteemed colleagues, to Arthur. What is it that you're going to do tomorrow to bring AI into your life, outside of Facebook's facial recognition, the LinkedIn cheesy responses to questions that they give you, the options, and let alone some of the other facets of social media that impact you from an AI perspective? That is the question, because you want to know what is the ultimate impact. And on the human, if you look at this whole continuum from birth to death, at every point on that journey, artificial intelligence is an integral part and will continue to be an integral part. Last point, I suppose, on this is that there's two things I want you to take away tonight, if I don't talk again, that is. One, download a movie called Do You Trust This Computer? Has anyone watched it? Okay, let me tell you in a second what that is. Anyone here? You guys should watch it. It's associated with Elon Musk in some way or the other. But there were 3 million downloads in less than half an hour. 3 million downloads in less than half an hour. It was allowed on the internet free for, I think, 60 minutes on that Sunday. I think it's a fascinating picture of artificial intelligence, the link up between private sector government and the legislative framework, and how you will be protected, how your children will be protected or not protected. That's the first thing I want to leave you with. And I suppose the second point that I want to leave you with is that you can be part of this digital economy more than being a consumer here in South Africa, because the products are consumed virtually. You've all heard of the cloud, right? So, you can participate in that form. And I do think there's a lot of excitement around this. The research capacity is critical for the country. We need direction from there. But we need you to push back on the policy environment and, of course, on business, so that we do ethical business and we're not using, Facebook's not around, we're not using the data of our customers to drive agendas that go beyond ethical value systems. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for those fascinating insights. I'm now going to ask one more question of each panelist before I turn it over to the audience. And this time I'm going to challenge them a little. So luckily they can't throw tomatoes at me because I'm not really here. But I'm going to start off by asking Benjamin to talk about whether the work with robotics isn't really just playing games. Are robots not just a toy? Because when we see Pepper representing Nedbank, our first reaction is that's a gimmick. And most of the other implementations of robots in terms of these bipedal or moving humanoid type devices come across as being toys. Everyone I've played with has shown me great potential for robotics, but they still feel totally like toys. Aren't you just playing in a big boy's toy shop?
Thanks, Arthur. That's a great question. I think they are mostly gimmicks, the ones you've been alluding to at least. But there is huge potential. So there's a lot of different aspects to robotics, and I'll answer this in terms of the area I work in. So I think the reason I like robotics, apart from the obvious, yes, I get to play with toys for a living, which is pretty awesome. And you know, it's also actually great for getting kids excited about STEM and those sorts of things. But in a very practical sense, the aspect I care about, rather than say building hardware and electronics and all those kinds of things, is the decision-making aspects of it. Now, if you look at what most people talk about in the AI space, it's machine learning and data science, or big data, depending on what kind of buzzwords you like throwing around. But fundamentally, the problem people like solving in that space is to make predictions. So we want to predict what will happen to stock prices. We want to try and make statements about who's this person, or where's the face in the photo, and who is this person, and those kinds of things. And a lot of this is just about understanding data. But there's a reason you want to understand data. You want to understand data so that you can make better decisions. So fundamentally, you want a whole lot of really cool AI algorithms sitting on your computer, analyzing your oodles of data you've collected about your customers, so that you can decide what to do next. So the aspect that I'm interested in about robotics is, can we cut humans out of the loop here? Can we get the machines to make the decisions instead? And this to me is the core AI problem and the core interesting problem of robotics. So from a research perspective, you know, if you're a good scientist worth your mettle, you want to run experiments that you can repeat and you can check against some sort of ground truth and you can compare against other algorithms and all sorts of things like that. It's very hard to test how well your research is doing if you put it in charge of a business for a week, right? But it's very easy to test it if you put it on a robot and say, let's see how many times you can get to the door from different places. And so the whole decision-making aspect of this is what's very interesting. And in my work at least, we use robots as interesting test beds to actually look at these problems. So from my perspective, that's really what we care about. So the robotic problem, which is in that case, how do I make decisions that have long-term consequences and might require me to make a number of decisions over time with very little feedback. So you'd have a similar problem if you're getting a system to play something like chess or Go, where you know there's some grand goal, which is win the game. But to do that, you've got to make a whole lot of moves and a whole lot of decisions. And if you happen to win the game, it's hard to say, did I win the game because I had a cunning plan the whole way along, or did I just get lucky at the end? And you've got to figure out what happened along the way that made this work. And to me, that's where this all comes together. Is we want systems that can make better decisions for us, because I'm sure most people will testify humans are terrible at making decisions. And so really this is what we're looking at in this space. So to me, that's the real promise of robotics. Is, you know, there's all the nice applications, which is things like self-driving cars and delivery drones and surgery robots, and all these kind of things. But fundamentally, in all those cases, they're just trying to make complicated decisions, and there's a lot deeper you can go in that space.
Thank you for that. You can see there's a fine line between good scientists and evil scientists.
It's the red glowing eyes.
Which one is Benji?
So, talking about evil scientists, what I'd like to ask Adam is the concept of leveraging, let's call it, and accessing brainwaves. And I refer to the examples I gave as well as the ones you gave. Brain to text being a particularly scary one of potential invasion of privacy. So is the concept of accessing brainwaves not the ultimate invasion of privacy, and in fact far more dangerous than anything Facebook did for the American electorate in the last few years?
It's a great and complicated question. I'd like to start off by maybe sharing a little bit of a story about this BrainToNet project in particular. Because I think a few years ago I was on Twitter and I was thinking, isn't it amazing that right now I can share thoughts with millions of people out there at an instant. It's at your fingertips. Now that's never been possible before. And so, I see some people are interacting with their smartphones at the moment, and I believe personally that some aspect of our consciousness is already existing within that system of the internet, because our brain state is trying to align with it. We actually have almost a compulsion to try and align our current brain state with what's happening in the network, So we have the sense that if the state of the network changes, we need to reflect that in the state of our brain and vice versa. So there's this fascinating interplay already happening with this technology, and I thought, what happens if we made that a little bit more intimate? What happens if we try to get really to the most raw signal? Exactly what Arthur's picking up on here is that, and that's how I thought of this idea too. I wanted to open source and live stream my own brain, and wanted to do it for 2 weeks, and I found difficulty doing that socially, but because and so at the end of the day, we ended up doing it as a project here, and it's brought up a lot of privacy and ethical concerns, which I think is the core of your question, Arthur. When we look at Facebook, we are choosing how to share data. We are choosing what type of data we wish to share, and we may not have read through the laborious terms and conditions, but we look no further than the business model to know exactly how that data is going to be used ultimately. Within our own, when it comes to sharing our own biological signals, this is totally uncharted territory. And it's something that I think we really have to get to grips with very, very quickly, because if you just look at the rate of acceleration and the doubling of innovation that Arthur showed, in terms of, I think the time horizon was a small time horizon, that pace is going to continue. In fact, that pace is going to get much more rapid. And if we don't start engaging with these things from policy direction right now and from an ethical consideration direction, I think that ultimately we're going to find ourselves in completely uncharted territory, and we're going to be taken out of the decision-making process entirely. And so I think when it comes to biological data in particular, which is so intimate to us, so private to us, and even just a measurement of which, for instance, a medical measurement by a doctor is something that we want to protect and we want to safeguard and make sure that we keep close to our chests. So when it comes to this topic, we need to start engaging with it. It's uncharted. We have to start thinking about which companies we're willing to engage with. If you're wearing an Apple Watch or some other smartwatch like I am, I'm willingly sharing certain information about my heart rate right now, and that's being streamed into the internet through my smartphone. So these systems are already set up, the infrastructure is there, the network is there, and I think it's time we start asking questions like, is the internet an appropriate place for us to be sharing these intimate signals that are within our bodies?
Good questions. We hope to have answers for that. But now you've heard from the evil scientists. Now we're going to hear from evil big business that uses the tools and the technology that the scientists develop in order to manipulate and change the behavior of the consumer in order to use your products more cost effectively and more profitably. Is that correct? Is that an appropriate assumption? Or is big business going to become more ethical, or will it be less ethical with access to these kind of tools? Now I'm thinking particularly about financial services, which is probably the most direct impact that big business can have on human beings.
Thank you, Arthur. So I think when it comes especially to the tools and to ethics, within the financial services sector, it's really adapt or die. And there's no two ways about it. So I think Adam just spoke very well about engagement, and that's really what it is. Traditionally, as banks, I think we've always been very slow to adapt, traditional in our ways as such, and yeah, very slow to take on technology. But with the way that the environment and the society is going, now we have fintechs, and customers are aware of this. They've used that kind of technology, and they understand now that, you know, banking or financial services can be done quicker, better, faster, you know. So, yes, that's our payoff line. Yes, and so because they have experienced, you know, the quicker, better, faster. As banks, if we do not then take on technology, we will die. So really the issue around that is to collaborate, but in an ethical way. And mainly because it's money that's involved, because it's a person's hard-earned income that's involved, you have to be ethical about it. So when we do mine the data, and I think that's what Benjamin was touching on as well around, you know, using data for quicker decision making. When we do look at data mining, we also then really have to bring in the ethical aspects. So we are heavily regulated in terms of how we look at data, in terms of privacy around financial information. And I think as we go on, you know, adopting more and more technology, the evil, the good, there will be more regulations coming up as well. So especially in Africa, there is not as much regulations yet within the internet space or within AI space. But I think as we move on and take on more technology, more artificial intelligence, we will get more and more policies coming in. We've already seen that now coming into South Africa with Poppy, some of you might be aware, which looks into your privacy around your information, what you can share, what we can share with third parties as well. And that is really what, you know, our products are based upon. How do we innovate, but in an ethical manner, in a way that is client-centric and affords our clients better decisions around their monies as well.
Thank you for that. And then we come to the evil technology vendors who, wherever you go in big tech and in big consulting, you find that there's a massive effort to try to get people excited and enthused about the technology. So at Accenture and Deloitte, for example, both of them have got these incredible innovation centers where they're demonstrating things like IoT and blockchain in action and so on. And when you go through there, you really want to bring all of that back into your organization. And now Sunil tells us that the Leonardo Center has got the same kind of, let's say, it's like the legalized cannabis clinics in the United States. It's just technology instead of cannabis that you're pushing at people because you really want to get them hooked on this technology, or not.
We got to sell, but maybe since we got this Oprah-style conversation piece going on, I can't say I'm going to give it to you and you and you and you, but I'm going to give you an opportunity. The IT is hosting its Future of Technology conference on Thursday. The normal ticket price is $5,000. The first 10 people that write back to Alumni Relations will get a free ticket. Okay? Got that? Okay, Purvi's at the back. You write to and say you want to attend. It's happening at Future Space, which is in Sandton. The speed is not up to that gigabyte speed that he mentioned, or the gigahertz speed that he mentioned. But it's 1,000 megabits per second. It's pretty cool, I think, for you. That's the first thing. The second thing that I'm going to leave you with, and I'll send that to Purvi, we put together as an industry, in the European context, some thinking around the impact of artificial intelligence currently and what we see going into the future. We'll have a share that with you. You can have a look at that, you know, and also from a government perspective. Now coming back to this, of course we've got to drip feed people. I've got kids, guys. You know, they got to go to Wits or wherever they want to go to. But on a more serious note, I think the whole world is moving in this way, and Africa will come. The world will come to Africa, right? They should come to Africa because, for many reasons, the opportunities here, the rates of return on business exceed 10, 8 times, and we're going to have the largest population. So it's critical that multinationals, that customers like Standard Bank, make this investment in South Africa and other parts of Africa and invite people to come over and participate in this. You don't know what you don't know, am I right? And you don't know what you need, am I right? Come on, guys. Work with me here. You don't know what you need until you need it, right? Remember, when you go to buy this car, the guy, he snowballs you, you go in there and he shows you the E-Class Mercedes and says, by the way, that's the older model and I've got the C-Class and whatever else class, and then you end up buying it. You always buy more than the house, or you want to spend more than the house you budgeted to buy. So we've got to do this. I think it's important, and we owe it to society to put the wares out there and say, you be the judge, or you be the participant in creating this digital future. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, we're in a highly competitive landscape. We've got, you know, local IT companies that are developing. We've got the academia who start businesses and are successful people. We've got to make sure that the digital economy creates more jobs. And to the last point, my good friend and colleague next to me mentioned the reduction of jobs. There's a recent study, we'll send that to you as well, just done in New Zealand, which shows that artificial intelligence and the digital economy will maybe reduce 20% of traditional jobs. Of course, what they're based on is a very small placebo. It's New Zealand, let's be honest, but they are quite a developed nation, despite them being located so far down and so on. And it's something to look at. Of course, others, you may debate that, of course, but it's a study, that's all. And that's what academics do. They make studies, they put it out there for us to pragmatize these things and to see whether it works on the ground. And I leave you with those thoughts. Your jobs are still intact. World Economic Forum has also written a paper on artificial intelligence, which they published a few weeks ago, I think 6, 8 weeks ago. Be a good resource to look at, and or maybe longer. And lastly, The Economist, not this month, the previous month, it's an interesting article on artificial intelligence and the impact. Have a look at these. I mean, it'll give you some more context around the kind of thinking that's going on in the real world out there in terms of on the ground, where the rubber hits the road as such. And I'll leave you with those thoughts.
Thank you. To be fair, I was playing devil's advocate with those questions, and I'm going to ask the audience to put questions to the panelists. But when you put the question, please direct it to a specific member of the panel, and don't cheat and ask all panelists to answer, because that reduces the number of people who can ask questions. I just want to put a cap on my question to Sunil to mention that the examples I gave of Accenture and Deloitte with their innovation spaces, SAP's Leonardo space, Standard Bank with its, if you've ever heard of the Playroom in Rosebank, or if you haven't heard of it, try and find out about it and try and get an invitation to explore it. And another example is the IBM Research Lab at the Tsimorogong Center, part of the Wits Joburg Center for Software Computing. All fascinating work environments that point to the future of the workplace and the kind of workplace that will attract the brightest young graduates of the future. And I think those are all examples of a different aspect of where technology is taking us, a different kind of workplace, aside from the technology that's actually used in those workplaces. So one can be cynical about it, but it's actually an amazing trend to watch. So with that, I'd like to open questions to the audience, starting here and then there.
I just have 2 questions. I've got one for Adam. They're talking about the studies about the neurosurgical brain and all that, and it's quite disturbing for me, and it's something that I've been researching on, quite frankly. And this is the challenge that I have with science, and this is one thing that Einstein has mentioned, to say, he fears the day that we hear now, the industrialization, and that I don't think there has been enough studies. And I'm just trying to understand the motive of science. Firstly, you talked about studying the wave brain. Are you guys tampering with consciousness? And that if that is the case, you are still looking at the study of the brain, then there is intuition, which is not even on the level of brain waves. So I'm trying to understand, what is the motive of you guys doing that? Are you trying to create a 3D visual world that is where people will be living? Or are you trying to merge the one that their people are already living in? What do I mean by that? We have people who are in their natural state, which they are called mediums, shamans, who are already visionaries by their natural state. What is science doing? Are you complementing? Are you completing? Well, I'm just trying to understand that aspect. Coming to the second one, which is banking.
I'm going to ask you to keep it very short.
Yes. Banking, you mentioned that the issues around trust, and you touched on cryptocurrency. And for me, there's two contradictory to that statement. Firstly is that the example of cryptocurrency, I think it's more linked with the value attached of what crypto is, not necessarily the industrialization of money. We are already in the process. We know money is going to go digital. We have examples of that. We have M-Pesa. When you are talking about trust, are you talking about trust in terms of transitioning from monetary physical money to digital money, or are you talking about the value of money?
Thank you. I thought all of these questions were challenging, but this is
It's next level. Next level.
So this is a good question, and I think a very fundamental question. We've probably talked for it for quite a long time. I think it's quite a relevant question because a lot of people have this on their minds. So I think to distill out the essence of your question, I think what you're asking is, what is the endeavor of science, for one? What is the endeavor of science? Is it to, how is the human being in the loop here? What are we actually trying to achieve? And then you're asking about, are we trying to recreate certain brain states? Are we altering consciousness? So I can certainly say that at this stage, science is not there. The brain is not a well understood frontier yet. There's very exciting times ahead where science can endeavor to move forward with understanding the brain, interpreting brain waves, and go even deeper into understanding what is consciousness. I think that even as a question itself could be a topic we could debate for years on end, trying to understand it, get to grips with it. And I often say we're using the very tool to try and understand the tool. So that's very challenging in and of itself. But your question around what is the endeavor of science, I think it's really a fundamental pursuit to try and find out what is the ground truth. We ask a question, we form a hypothesis, and then we try and validate that hypothesis through measurement and experiment. But your question also kind of takes us a little bit out of the realm of what is really current mainstream science into thinking about other activities that are occurring, other phenomena that we observe. And I would respond by saying that I think as humans we have always observed through a limited 5 senses, and ultimately we make scientific steps based on the information we receive and perceive in those. And I pose the question that we didn't even quite, or the point that we didn't even know about infrared being evident until we could observe it with our senses. So we don't quite know what's out there, and so the frontier is a very exciting one because I think we are still yet to discover a great deal of stuff about the world as far as we think we know. And to try and then address your final point about what are we doing with humans in this loop, and you started off, and I'm going to circle back to your first statement, is that you're struggling to engage and understand science, and it seems that science is almost problematic in some way. Am I correct in understanding you in that way? It's like science is somewhat of a challenge, and I just leave you with the thought that Einstein created Einstein discovered some fascinating technology, some fascinating phenomenon that he understood about the natural world, which was then very unfortunately exploited by members of humanity who formed an atomic bomb. So it wasn't ever his intention to form this discovery. So then science's pursuit is to really understand the natural world, and technology's pursuit is to drive that forward. And what we do with that technology is our responsibility, and that's how we adopt these technologies, how we morph them. And if we choose to use them for evil means and for power, we're going to ultimately find ourselves in a bad place. And I think it comes down to that. So science is about the understanding, and then if it's applied in the incorrect way, I think we do encounter social challenges that you allude to. So I'm sorry my answer's a little long, but I think it's I think you raised some interesting points along the way, and I hope I've managed to address some of them.
Vimbai?
Thank you. All right. I think coming to your question around the trust issue. So if I look at it, I think, like I mentioned before, you and I, educated, we've heard these terms cryptocurrency, we've heard these terms ATM, and so on. I look at, for instance, when I tell my daughter that growing up I had a little book which I would take to the bank that reveals my age. But yeah, some of you might know, some of you might not know it. But the book was actually equivalent to what you have now as online banking or as a card. And with that, it actually, I would open my little banking book and it would be written, I have 200 rands and then I want to save more. I now have 500 rands, I want to save more. And I knew that the bank cannot take away my money because I've got this little book which shows exactly how much I have. So that was sort of like the ledger, you know. Come today, you know, I battled to get my father onto online banking because he was saying, okay, and then I pay Arthur, and you're saying he's going to get money just because I've clicked there, you know. So I think when it comes to banking, especially financial services, and I speak about trust, it's both a value issue and it's a trust issue, because for the educated, they understand. But believe me, when we look at the South African society and the Africa that I work in, there is very few people we're talking about in that spectrum. If I go to Nkandla, for example, most of, you know, they'll be talking about cows as value for money, you know, and not your, what is cryptocurrency? Yeah. You know, it doesn't mean anything to them. So as banks, as the financial sector, we have to be all-inclusive. We have to work around and try and make people understand exactly what technology and innovations is bringing, which is why I spoke about being client-centric. You have to understand, because you're dealing with a whole spectrum of people, not just the educated. We also want the unbanked to be banked. And that's what we're talking about when I talk about value, when I talk about trust. They have to understand that if the money is virtual, it still is your money. We talk about, you spoke about M-Pesa. M-Pesa has done very well, but in how many markets? In Kenya. And a few other markets, yes. But it's not everyone. I look at South African environment, not everyone has a cell phone, not everyone has, you know. I offered to pay my domestic worker via e-wallet and she refused. She says she's not sure she'll get the money. And this is someone who's living in Johannesburg, you know. So how about someone who's living deep down there, you know? So you really have to try and be all-inclusive, collaborate with the people that you're trying to serve. And it's the entire South Africa, it's the entire Africa that we're looking to bank.
Thank you for that question here. I just want to stress that the questions need to be short. We have less than 10 minutes left, and only one question to one panelist at a time, please. Next one is there, and then there, and then there.
Okay, cool. This question is to Sunil. So we talk about the massive growth of AI and its potential, but how can developing countries, particularly in Africa, participate in this wave to solve some real-world problems affordably without the risk of jobs being replaced by AI and robotics?
Yeah, 2 cents. I think we need to look at people who are not in any age group category here. We've got to ensure that the youth of our country, and I'm talking about the majority, right? The majority are given access to opportunities to understand what AI is. I'm talking about robotics, like First Level League. I think I sent a video to you guys. Little things that give people an understanding. The strength of our creativity is in the number of our population. That's 53 million. But you know, much less on this 53 million actually even understand what AI. They'll ask you how you eat that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we've got to be able to utilize existing structures. Most multinationals are providing platforms on which people can code on, develop stuff. I mean, from MIT, you know, we're running some things with kids across Africa called Africa Code Week, where they learn to code in 45 minutes. Of course, they don't write code that will open, set your door open at home at the garage and so on, but it's to get that happening. Lastly, the venture capital environment in this country sucks, right? Who disagrees with me? Right, it sucks, and I'll tell you why it sucks. It's niche, it's focused on specific groupings of individuals in the economic structure and social strata, and that has to be diversified to give entrepreneurs the opportunity to delve in this area and come up with things like this spice company, which I love, by the way. When I'm in the States, I would love to go and see this. And I think that's what the engine of artificial intelligence will be all about in the future. Of course, we need the academics to come in and, you know, get us, trap those brains that have the IQs beyond 140 plus and so on. Thank you.
Can I add something to that? Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I just want to add something to that. So, on the issue of how Africa can get involved, so there's a group of us that started this initiative last year, including Bukosi, who, I don't know where he is, but, so there were 8 of us that put this thing together, all South Africans or expat South Africans. We had the biggest ever machine learning summer school, which we held at Wits last year. We had 330 people from 30 countries. We brought students from all over Africa. We're doubling the size of it this year in Stellenbosch. We've had top speakers from all over the world coming to speak. We've had subsequently 13 satellite events across the continent. So Africa is very much becoming a part of what's going on. That's called the Deep Learning Tower.
Cool. Next question.
Just as a follow-up on that question, are you actually working with the School of Education, because the development of teachers will determine how much progress is made in that space?
That's a very good question. We've started some talks about things around that space, and we've been working with various other companies around there as well, because we think there's a lot of potential for AI to contribute to education, particularly around aspects of things such as adapting to individual students' learning styles and so on, which is what you really want from a good teacher. But clearly we have problems in the numbers of teachers we have available and the way they're remunerated and valued in society, and we think that this is a way to boost that.
Question there?
Hello. Thanks to the panel for a very interesting talk tonight. I'd like to direct a question to Arthur.
Okay.
In one of your conferences, Cisco Live conference, spoke about a 30-year projection. You only gave us the first 10 years. Are you hiding something from us? I want to know what's happening.
Yes. Okay. They looked at fairly advanced technology. I've written a few articles about it, and I'm happy to send it to anyone who drops me an email summing up all the predictions that they made. But they essentially take to the 2050s, where they expect a colony, a real colony on Mars by the 2050s. So regular manned space flight to Mars. And part of the reason that they are predicting it to happen by then is because of the work that Elon Musk is doing today, interestingly enough. So there's a South African angle to that question. The next question was there. And I'll take 2 more questions after that, one at the back there and one here.
Hi, my question is to Benjamin. As you continue to improve decision making in robots, are we embedding any morality code, a sense of values to these robots? I think you used a great example, multiple ways to get to the door. How do we make sure one of those ways doesn't run over someone while trying to get to the door first? So all of those, are we thinking about this, are we to improve the learning and what we're passing through to these robots?
So that's a fantastic question, and that's one of the big concerns with AI at the moment. I'm pleased to say in the last couple of months we've started regular discussions with the philosophy department around these issues. Usually over beers as well. But no, this is a real issue, and this is one of the perceived threats from AI. I think most of us working in the field don't ever see the Terminator scenario of some evil robots rising up, but we do see humans giving terrible instructions to robots, or any intelligent system that might be super capable. I mean, anyone who's worked in any business knows that it's impossible to correctly incentivize people where they won't find loopholes of how to exploit your system. So if you've got something that's even smarter than humans and better at optimizing, that's exploiting loopholes, that's not ideal. So there's a lot of work at the moment on various aspects of explainable AI and safe AI, where we can kind of formally prove that they meet criteria that we set for them. The big challenge is, I think, the perception is often that, you know, we program these AI systems with a lot of formal rules that say if something happens then do this. Now that's the way things worked back in the 60s and 70s. These days we don't tell them that, we just give them examples of things we do and don't want them to do and get them to figure out the details themselves. And that makes it very hard for us to actually understand what's happening. So this is a very active research area.
Great.
It's not comforting, but
it's a critical question.
Hi, I've got a question for Sunil. If you look in South Korea, for instance, okay, which is one of the most connected countries, they've got digital detox centers and digital rehab centers for digital addictions, etc. If you look at, like, you get 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds now spending 6 hours a night on Farmville and other things. How do we deal with digital addiction that seems to be growing more, but we don't talk about it too much in the West yet?
Absolutely. You know, this talks to the ethical behavior of companies looking at time zones, almost having, I remember when I was at school, this George Orwell book, which was called Animal Farm, I think you noticed, and then the follow-up to that, 1984. So I'll give my age away. And we had to write this Olympiad. But essentially it's about the monitoring by the organizations that are actually benefiting from a monetary perspective. They have an ethical responsibility to that, that's one. Then the government legislation, and the very same South Korea you're talking about, had a very high work ethic with their kids, and they found that there was a problem there to shut that down because these kids were working until 10 at night. Now you know Asians, guys, right? They work hard, right? They're hardworking people, right? Forget the fact that they work in sweat laboratories and all that. But it's also a cultural thing. That when they get hooked onto this stuff, you know, I have some DNA from that end of the world, they get hooked up into this stuff. They don't want to let it go, and they continue in this regard. There has to be advisory. We don't know what we don't know yet. But the side effects, and I look to my kids. So at home I have this thing, and we have a room where everyone sits when they get onto devices together or whatever. And there's a cut-off time, right? Now, addiction in any format, you know, it can happen in a population, and we're all predisposed to that. So we've got to put in legislation. There have to be these rehab centers. We don't run the risk yet in South Africa, in my view. Of course, there could be a few here who stay up late and all of that because you have access, as my good colleague mentioned, but the access to the internet. But as internet prices drop, that's the other thing. The deviancy will increase, and therein, the internet companies providing service have to act. And there should be a fund put in place. Like there is a fund for IT companies who manufacture hardware now, for, you know, the tin companies like HP and others, they have, as an OEM, they have to pay to government, and the amount is actually 7 billion rand, if you aggregate all of it, more or less, to deal with these issues. And I think the companies that offer broadband should be part of that process. Just saying. Any answers?
Last question.
Thanks for the talk, panelists. My question is for Adam. So the question I have is about brain-machine interfaces, and I want to know, in terms of your opinion broadly, how far away are we from having invasive brain-machine interfaces, and when will I be able to play an MMORPG online?
You can actually play them now. So cool question, thanks for the question. There is a company that is very secretive called Neuralink, which is Elon Musk's company actually, where they are rumored to be integrating neurology with computers. So That means plugging something into potentially your brain or some other element of your body and interfacing with the computer. Going back to kind of pioneers of the field like Kevin Warwick, who implanted something into his own body and was able to communicate on the internet with his wife using his nervous system and could open doors using, I mean, for instance, he connected up his arm to his wife's arm, and there was feedback when he moved his arm to his wife. So you know they were basically linked together through technology, and this was in I think the 90s or early 2000s. So I think it's already happening to a great extent, and I think that if companies like Neuralink are successful, I mean, they will hold seriously immense power. You know, go back to the dangers of these things. We've got to be cognizant, we've got to start talking about it and understand what the future is. It's coming so very rapidly, and I know I made that point earlier. My opinion on this is that I can't give you a time horizon projection, but what I can say is you can already interact with the computer using your biological signals in very interesting ways, with consumer-grade electronics at very cheap, very cheap costs. So it's a fascinating field. It's going to be extremely complex to navigate from an ethical perspective, from a societal perspective. But at the end of the day, I think it is something that is coming. Either we've got these brilliant decision-making robots who just completely disintermediate us, or we're going to integrate. And I wish we had more time to debate this point, or we're going to have to integrate ourselves, our biology, with these types of interfaces. I hope it answers your question. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thanks for these fascinating insights from the panel. And I'd just like to wrap up by making the observation that Sunil defamed you guys earlier. He spoke about a wide range of ages, from young to old. The reality is that if you're in this audience, I believe that every mind here is actually a young, open, vibrant mind. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here.